The Galactic Council chamber fell silent as Ambassador Jarix of the Centauri Collective posed the question that had haunted xenobiologists for 3 standard cycles since humanity's admission to the greater galactic community. The question hung in the recycled air like a challenge, like an accusation, like a mystery wrapped in madness. "Why?" the ambassador demanded, voice trembling with genuine bewilderment through their translation matrix. "Do humans choose to remain on Earth when the galaxy offers 10,000 safer havens?" The human representative, Ambassador Chun, smiled that peculiar expression that so many species found unsettling, a baring of teeth that somehow conveyed warmth rather than threat, and began to speak. "To understand why we stay," Chun said quietly, "you must first understand what Earth truly is. Not the sanitized version presented in our colonial brochures. Not the carefully curated tourist zones where off-world dignitaries sip filtered water and breathe scrubbed air behind force fields, but the raw, untamed reality of our homeworld. Earth is classified as a Class 12 death world by every objective measure the galaxy employs. Our atmosphere contains oxygen at concentrations that would be considered violently corrosive to 73% of known sapient species. Our gravity well would crush the bones of the Andromedans to powder, and leave the crystalline Shayuri as glittering fragments upon our shores. The microbial life that coats every surface of our world, invisible to the naked eye yet numbering in the billions per square centimeter, represents a biological warfare arsenal so diverse and aggressive that contamination protocols require 3 layers of sterilization before any off-world visitor can safely leave our quarantine zones. But that, Chen continued, voice gaining strength, is merely the baseline hostility. The ambient dangers that we've learned to live with since before we discovered fire. Earth actively tries to kill us with weather systems that spawn hurricanes carrying the kinetic force of antimatter warheads, tornadoes that can drive a piece of straw through solid steel, and lightning strikes that deliver more voltage in a microsecond than power some of your smaller colony vessels. Our tectonic plates grind against each other with such fury that entire cities can be swallowed into cracks in the earth or buried under mountains of ash in the span of a morning. We live on a world where the ground itself can turn to liquid beneath our feet, where walls of water taller than skyscrapers can erase coastlines, where temperatures swing from lethal heat to killing cold with the simple rotation of our planet. The other ambassadors shifted uncomfortably in their specialized seating. The Valkorian representative, a being of pure energy barely contained within a magnetic field, pulsed with colors that their translator rendered as profound confusion. This only scratched the surface, Chen noted, and now the humans' eyes held something the assembly had rarely seen directed at them. Pity. Pity that they could not understand. Our world teems with megafauna that evolution designed as living weapons. We share our cities with spiders whose venom can liquefy flesh, snakes that can kill with a single bite, insects that carry diseases capable of burning through a population like wildfire. In our ocean swim creatures with enough poison to kill every being in this chamber 1,000 times over, predators so perfectly evolved for murder that they've remained virtually unchanged for millions of years, because nature simply could not improve upon their lethality. We build our homes in forests where bears can tear through reinforced doors, where big cats stalk with patience measured in hours, where even the plants have learned to kill, some slowly with toxins, others quickly with thorns that can pierce clean through a human hand. And yet, Chen said, leaning forward with an intensity that made several delegates instinctively draw back, this is not why we stay. You think we're mad, clinging to a world that wants us dead. You've offered us sanctuary on tranquil garden worlds where the weather is regulated, where predators were long ago rendered extinct, where every danger has been catalogued and neutralized. The Zephyrian hegemony offered us an entire continent on prima serenity, where the most dangerous creature is a herbivore no larger than a human child's fist. The collective itself extended an invitation to settle the peaceful rings, artificial habitats where every variable is controlled, where nothing unexpected ever happens, where death by natural causes has been reduced to a statistical anomaly. We politely decline them all. You see madness in this decision. We see something you've forgotten, something you sacrificed somewhere along your journey to the stars, something we refuse to surrender no matter how many galaxies we explore or how many ages pass. The chamber's environmental systems hummed in the silence that followed, adjusting atmospheric composition for a dozen different metabolic requirements, maintaining the artificial equilibrium that allowed such diverse species to coexist in manufactured peace. Chen stood, and despite being physically smaller than most beings present, seemed to fill the space with presence alone. Earth made us, the ambassador said simply. Every challenge it threw at our ancestors, every disaster that should have ended us, every predator that hunted us, every disease that culled us, every storm that tested us, we survived. Not because we were the strongest, or the fastest, or the most venomous. We survived because Earth taught us something more valuable than any natural weapon. It taught us to adapt. It taught us to cooperate. It taught us that our strength lies not in individual dominance, but in collective resilience. When the floods came, we built boats together. When the predators hunted, we stood watch together. When the diseases spread, we cared for each other together. Earth didn't make us the apex predator through biological superiority. It made us apex through something you've engineered out of your safe worlds. The absolute necessity of community forged in the crucible of constant threat. Ambassador Chen's words settled over the council like morning dew on a battlefield, gentle yet somehow heavy with accumulated truth. The human continued, and now there was something in that voice that made the assembled representatives truly listen, not with the polite attention of diplomacy, but with the rapt focus of students before a teacher revealing fundamental secrets of the universe. You asked why we choose to stay on a death world, Chen said softly, but you're asking the wrong question. The question isn't why we stay. The question is what would we become if we left? Consider what you built in your safe havens, the ambassador continued, gesturing to encompass not just the chamber, but the very concept of regulated worlds beyond. The Centauri Collective has existed for 12,000 of your years on worlds, where the climate is controlled to within 0.03 degrees variance. Your population experiences weather as a philosophical concept rather than a living force. When was the last time one of your citizens had to make a choice between safety and necessity, had to weigh risk against survival, had to step into genuine danger because someone they loved needed them? The Centauri delegates exchanged glances, their membrane-covered eyes reflecting the chamber's ambient light in patterns that spoke of discomfort. Chen's point landed with precision. They couldn't remember. Their world had eliminated such choices generations ago. The Zephyrians pride themselves on longevity, Chen continued, turning toward their section of the council. Your people routinely live for 3 centuries in comfort and security, and you consider this the pinnacle of civilization. But I've read your literature, studied your history before the great taming of your homeworld. Your poets once wrote about passion that burned bright and brief, about the beauty found in transience, about the urgency that mortality brings to love and creation and achievement. Those poets are extinct now, aren't they? Not dead, but simply no longer born. When you have 300 years of guaranteed tomorrow, why create anything urgent today? Why love with desperation when you have decades to spare? Why make the hard choice, the brave choice, the costly choice, when you can always wait for a safer option? This is what safety costs, and Chen's voice now carried something that made even the most cynical diplomats in the room straighten in their seats. You purchased longevity at the price of intensity. You bought security with the currency of meaning. Don't misunderstand, the human added quickly, seeing offense beginning to color the electromagnetic fields of several delegates. These aren't accusations. They're observations. You've made choices that work for your species, choices that have brought peace and prosperity, and comfortable lives to trillions. But they're not choices humans can make. We've tried. Oh, you'd be surprised how many times we've tried. The first colony ships left Earth 400 years ago, before we met you, before we knew we weren't alone in the universe. They were designed as generation ships, self-contained worlds that would deliver our descendants to distant stars. We called it Project Exodus, and it failed in ways our greatest minds never anticipated. The ships were marvels of engineering, perfect environments where every need was met, every danger eliminated, every variable controlled. Within 3 generations, depression became epidemic. Within 5, innovation stopped. By Generation 7, the ships were drifting monuments to our hubris, their populations maintained on antidepressants and virtual reality, keeping them placid enough to manage but too listless to thrive. We had to send rescue missions to bring them home or redirect them to established colonies where Earth's chaos had already taken root. Do you understand what this taught us? It wasn't that our engineering failed. It was that we'd succeeded too well. We created exactly what you have, a perfectly safe environment, and our species began to die not in body but in spirit. Chun walked slowly across the council floor, and the gesture was so unusual, so contrary to protocol that no one thought to object. The ambassador stopped before the great viewport that showed the spiral arm of the galaxy in all its terrible beauty, stars being born and dying, cosmic violence on scales that dwarfed all mortal concerns. We tested it again and again, the human said, voice now barely above a whisper, but somehow carrying to every corner of the chamber. We established colonies on garden worlds. We built habitats in space. We created underground cities on dead moons where we controlled every aspect of existence. And every time, the same pattern emerged. First generation, grateful for the safety. Second generation, comfortable but restless. Third generation, seeking challenges where none exist. Fourth generation, creating danger artificially, taking absurd risks because the human psyche demands some level of threat to function. By the 5th or 6th generation, the communities would either collapse into chaos as people manufactured their own disasters, or they'd stagnate into medicated contentment that looked peaceful from the outside but was spiritually indistinguishable from death. There's a Valkorian saying, Chen said, turning to address the energy being who had questioned earlier. Translated roughly, it means that a flame burns brightest when sheltered from the wind. But that's not true for humans. We've learned that we are the flame that requires the wind. The storm doesn't extinguish us. It's what keeps us burning hot enough to illuminate the darkness. Earth's dangers aren't obstacles we overcome despite our nature. They're the forge that creates our nature. Every human alive today is descended from ancestors who survived ice ages and plagues, who weathered droughts that lasted generations, who endured famines that killed millions, who outlasted predators that hunted us when we were still learning to use tools. That survival is written into our DNA, encoded in our psychology, embedded in what makes us human. When a hurricane forms in the Gulf of Mexico, Chen continued with gathering passion. Weather services track it for weeks as it builds power, and we watch it grow from a tropical disturbance to a Category 5 monster carrying winds that can peel the roof off a building. And yes, we evacuate. We're not suicidal. But then, after it passes, we return. We rebuild. Every single time. Not because we have nowhere else to go. We have the resources to relocate entire coastal populations inland, to build cities in safer zones, to abandon the hurricane corridors entirely. We don't. We return because those storms teach us something essential about ourselves. They teach us that we can be broken and rebuild stronger. They teach us that community isn't just convenient, it's survival. They teach us that the things worth having, the places worth calling home, are worth fighting for even when the fight seems unwinnable. The assembled delegates sat in contemplative silence as Ambassador Chen's words washed over them, like waves against a shore, each syllable eroding away another layer of their certainty. The human wasn't finished, and now the ambassador's voice took on a quality that several empathic species would later describe as achingly beautiful, the sound of someone speaking a truth so fundamental that it resonated with the very structure of conscious thought. You look at Earth and see a planet trying to kill us, Chen said, but we look at Earth and see a mother who loves us enough to make us strong. Consider the simple act of a human child learning to walk. They fall. Constantly. Dozens of times a day in those early months. They bruise their knees, bump their heads, cry in frustration and pain. Any parent could prevent this, could simply carry the child everywhere, could eliminate the risk and the pain and the struggle. But we don't, because we understand something essential. The falling is not the failure. The falling is the lesson. The scraped knee is the tuition payment for the education in balance and perseverance. Earth has been teaching us to walk for 300,000 years, and yes, we've fallen countless times. Civilizations have collapsed. Populations have been decimated. We've stumbled and scraped our knees on a planetary scale. But we've never stopped trying to walk, and now look at us. We're not just walking. We're running, jumping, climbing, dancing across the stars. The Shayuri delegate, a crystalline being whose species communicated primarily through light refraction, pulsed a question that the translation matrix rendered as genuine curiosity rather than challenge. Did humans never resent their homeworld for its harshness? Did they never curse the ground that shook beneath them, the storms that destroyed their works, the diseases that ravaged them? Chen's response came with a smile that held both sadness and pride in equal measure. Every day, the ambassador admitted. Every single day. There's not a human alive who hasn't shaken their fist at the sky during a storm, who hasn't wept in frustration when disaster undid years of work in moments, who hasn't questioned why we were born to such a merciless world. But here's what you need to understand about humans. We contain multitudes. We can curse Earth and love it simultaneously. We can fear it and refuse to leave it. We can acknowledge its cruelty and still find it beautiful. This isn't contradiction. This is complexity. This is being human. There's a place on Earth called Pompeii, Chen continued, and now the ambassador was in full storytelling mode, painting pictures with words that made even species without visual processing organs see the scene. 2,000 years ago, a volcano called Vesuvius erupted with such violence that it buried an entire city in ash within hours. Thousands died, their final moments preserved in volcanic material, frozen mid-stride or huddled with loved ones or attempting futile escape. It should have been a warning. It should have marked that region as cursed ground, a place to abandon and forget. Instead, people returned. They built new cities in the shadow of the same volcano. They planted vineyards on the slopes enriched by ancient ash. They raised children within sight of the mountain that killed their ancestors. And Vesuvius has erupted dozens of times since. Each time, the survivors rebuild. Each time they stay. You think this is madness, and perhaps by your standards it is. But to humans, it's something else entirely. It's defiance, yes, but not the blind defiance of the foolish. It's the calculated defiance of a species that has weighed the risks against the rewards and found the rewards worth the price. Those volcanic soils grow grapes that produce wine unlike any in the galaxy. That danger, that constant low-level threat, creates a culture of passion and urgency and fierce love of life that you simply cannot replicate in safety. The people of Vesuvius don't live there despite the volcano. In a way that's hard to articulate but essential to understand, they live there because of it. The mountain reminds them every single day that time is finite, that tomorrow is not guaranteed, that the present moment is infinitely precious precisely because it might be ripped away without warning. This philosophy permeates human culture in ways both obvious and subtle. Our greatest literature comes from tragedy and struggle, our most moving music from suffering and triumph over it, our most cherished memories from moments when we overcame fear to achieve something meaningful. We have a saying, smooth seas never made a skilled sailor. You can keep a ship in harbor its entire existence, perfectly safe from every storm, and it will remain pristine and useless. Or you can take it to sea, risk the waves and the wind and the weather, and through that risk create something with purpose and skill and stories worth telling. Earth is the sea we refuse to avoid, and every human is a ship that's chosen to sail it rather than rot in safe harbor. The economic argument alone should convince you, one of the more pragmatic delegates interjected, a merchant prince from the trading conglomerates, whose species had long ago mastered the art of risk assessment. Surely the cost of maintaining civilization on a death world, the infrastructure required to survive the constant disasters, the resources devoted to emergency services and disaster recovery, surely all of this represents an inefficiency that migration would eliminate. Chen's laugh was genuine and carried surprising warmth. You're absolutely right, the ambassador agreed, and that's precisely the point. Yes, it costs us enormously to live on Earth. Do you know what that cost buys us? Problem-solving abilities unmatched by any species in the collective. When your climate-controlled world experiences a 0.2-degree temperature fluctuation, it's a crisis that requires committee meetings and expert consultations. When Earth decides to vary our temperature by 40 degrees in a single day, we shrug and layer our clothing. We've engineered structures that flex with earthquakes rather than resist them, designed cities that can flood and drain and continue functioning, created agricultural systems that thrive despite droughts and freezes and infestations that would devastate your monoculture gardens. Every disaster we survive makes us better equipped for the next one, and not just the natural ones. When the KRYL invasion fleet arrived in our system 20 years ago, before the Collective's defensive pact, do you remember what happened? Your own military advisor said Earth would fall within weeks. We held them off for 6 months with nothing but jury-rigged defenses and improvised tactics, and we did it because every human alive had been training for disaster response since childhood. When your world runs on predictable systems and those systems are disrupted, you're paralyzed. When our world has been disrupting our systems since before we had language, we're practiced. Adaptation isn't a skill we study. It's a reflex we're born with. Ambassador Chen paused, letting the weight of revelation settle like dust after an explosion, and in that silence, something shifted in the chamber's atmosphere. The other delegates were no longer simply listening to justify their confusion about humanity. They were beginning, perhaps for the first time, to genuinely understand. The human ambassador moved back to the center of the floor, and when speaking resumed, it was with a vulnerability that caught many by surprise. But I would be lying if I told you it was only about strength and survival, Chen said quietly. There's another reason we stay on Earth, one that's harder to quantify, but perhaps more important than all the practical arguments combined. Earth is beautiful. Heartbreakingly, impossibly, cruelly beautiful. And its beauty is inseparable from its danger. The Andromedans, whose species had evolved in the stable light of binary stars, emitted a harmonic that translated as skepticism. How can beauty emerge from threat? How can terror produce wonder? Let me show you, Chen replied, and with a gesture, activated the chamber's holographic display system. The room filled with imagery of Earth, but not the sanitized tourist recordings. These were raw feeds, unfiltered moments captured by humans living their ordinary lives in extraordinary circumstances. Watch this, the ambassador said softly, and the display showed a supercell thunderstorm forming over the American plains. The delegates saw clouds building into towers that reached the edge of space, saw lightning branching through the sky in fractal patterns, saw the storm rotating with such power that it warped the very air around it. Humans stood beneath this, Chin narrated, not in bunkers or behind force fields, but in the open, watching. Some were storm chasers, scientists studying the phenomenon, but others were simply people who drove hours for the privilege of witnessing this violence, this terrible beauty. The image shifted to the aurora borealis, curtains of green and purple light dancing across the Arctic sky, caused by solar radiation that would be lethal without Earth's magnetic field. Then to bioluminescent waves crashing on a shore, each breaker glowing with the light of 1 billion microscopic organisms. Then to a sunrise seen from the summit of Mount Everest, the deadliest mountain on Earth, where the air is so thin that humans die without supplemental oxygen, yet where thousands attempt the climb each year not for resources or strategic advantage, but simply to stand at the top and see what can be seen from that lethal height. You can simulate these phenomena, Chin said, as the images continued to cascade through the display. You can create auroras in laboratories, engineer bioluminescence in controlled environments, project sunrise simulations. But it's not the same. It's never the same. Because the beauty we find meaningful isn't just in the visual spectacle. It's in the context. Those lights in the sky are beautiful because they're the visible evidence of our star trying to kill us and our planet protecting us. That glowing ocean is beautiful because those organisms are toxic, because the sea they inhabit could drown us, because the beauty comes packaged with deadly respect. That sunrise from Everest is transcendent because achieving it required risking everything, because the price of that view is potentially your life. The display shifted again, and now it showed human festivals and gatherings, but always with Earth's dangers as backdrop. Communities in Bangladesh celebrating monsoon festivals even as flood waters lapped at their stilted homes. Japanese cherry blossom viewings held in the shadow of Mount Fuji, an active volcano that could devastate the region. Californians having beach parties, while smoke from wildfires painted the sunset in shades of orange and red that spoke simultaneously of beauty and destruction. We celebrate in the face of threat, Chin explained, because the threat makes the celebration meaningful. Every moment of joy is sweeter because we know it's fragile. Every moment of peace is more precious because we understand how easily it can shatter. You've eliminated this from your worlds, and yes, you've gained safety. But you've lost the intensity that comes from knowing, really knowing in your bones, that this moment, right now, is all you're guaranteed. A Centauri delegate finally spoke, voice modulated to convey genuine seeking of understanding rather than challenge. But surely this intensity comes at a cost to mental health and well-being? We have records of human stress responses, elevated cortisol levels, anxiety disorders, trauma from disaster experiences. How do you justify perpetuating this suffering? Chin nodded slowly, acknowledging the validity of the concern. You're right. Living on Earth comes with psychological costs. We have higher baseline stress than most species. We experience anxiety and trauma. We carry the weight of knowing that disaster could strike at any moment. But here's what your medical databases might not capture. We've also evolved remarkable resilience and recovery mechanisms. Human psychology includes something we call post-traumatic growth. The phenomenon where experiencing and surviving trauma actually makes many people stronger, more compassionate, more grateful for what they have. Not everyone experiences it, and we should never romanticize suffering, but it exists, and it's common enough that we built entire philosophical and cultural frameworks around it. More than that, Chin continued with gathering passion, we've developed psychological tools specifically designed to thrive under uncertainty. Mindfulness practices that ground us in the present moment. Community support systems that activate during crisis. creative expressions that transform suffering into art and meaning. We've learned to hold hope and realism in balance, to plan for the worst while working toward the best, to acknowledge our fear without being paralyzed by it. These aren't just coping mechanisms. They're wisdom. They're the accumulated learning of a species that's been processing trauma and finding meaning in chaos for hundreds of thousands of years. And yes, sometimes it breaks us. Sometimes individuals can't cope, and we've built systems to help them, imperfect systems, but constantly improving. But most of us, most of the time, we bend under the weight and spring back stronger. The holographic display shifted to show human children, and this seemed to affect the delegates more than anything previous. These weren't children in controlled educational environments or monitored play areas. They were children climbing trees that could drop them, swimming in oceans that could drown them, exploring forests where danger lurked, playing in snow that could freeze them. And they were laughing. The pure, uninhibited joy of young beings testing their limits, discovering their capabilities, learning through manageable risk what they were capable of becoming. We teach our children about danger from the moment they can understand language, Chin narrated, because we have to. But we don't teach them to fear the world. We teach them to respect it. We show them that the ocean is powerful enough to kill them and beautiful enough to inspire them. We explain that fire can burn and also warm, that storms can destroy and also cleanse, that the world is neither safe nor malevolent but simply indifferent, and it's our job to find our place within it. This is the education Earth provides that your safe worlds cannot. Our children grow up understanding that they are not the center of the universe, that nature doesn't care about their plans or their feelings, that survival requires effort and skill and luck. But they also grow up knowing that they come from a long line of survivors, that humans have faced worse and prevailed, that they carry within them the strength of every ancestor who refused to surrender to Earth's challenges. This creates a very different psychology than growing up in a world that's been designed to accommodate you, where every rough edge has been smoothed away, where discomfort is treated as a design flaw rather than a teacher. The council chamber had transformed over the course of Ambassador Chin's testimony. What began as a simple inquiry into human irrationality had evolved into something more profound, a meditation on the very nature of sentient existence and the choices that define civilizations. Chin stood now at the viewport again, silhouetted against the galaxy's light, and when the ambassador spoke, it was with the gravity of final summation. "So you ask why we choose to live on a death world," Chin said, and now every delegate leaned forward, conscious that they were approaching the heart of the matter. The answer is that we don't see it as a death world. We see it as the only world that's truly alive. Your garden planets, your regulated habitats, your controlled environments, they're beautiful in their own way. They're safe and comfortable and peaceful. But they're also, forgive me for saying, somewhat dead. You've eliminated the chaos, but chaos is the engine of evolution, of change, of growth. You've removed the danger, but danger is what makes safety sweet. You've engineered out the suffering, but suffering is what gives meaning to joy. Chin turned to face the assembly directly, and there was such fierce pride in the humans' bearing that several delegates would later report feeling moved despite themselves. Earth is alive in a way your worlds are not. It changes and grows and surprises us. It creates new diseases that force us to adapt our medicine, new weather patterns that challenge our engineering, new geological shifts that redraw our maps. It refuses to be fully known or completely controlled. And this constant negotiation with a living planet that has its own agenda independent of ours, this is what keeps us vital. We are not masters of Earth. We're not even really in conflict with it. We're dancing with it, a dance that's lasted hundreds of thousands of years, and we've gotten quite good at following its lead while adding our own steps. The ambassador began to pace slowly, and the words came faster now. infused with passion that transcended mere argument and approached something like poetry. When we leave Earth, when we establish colonies on other worlds or build habitats in space, we don't try to replicate Earth's safety. We replicate its challenges. We introduce controlled chaos. We design systems that require adaptation. We create environments where failure is possible because success without the possibility of failure is meaningless. This isn't because we're addicted to suffering or because we don't value comfort. It's because we understand at a fundamental level that growth requires resistance. Muscles atrophy without weight to push against. Minds stagnate without problems to solve. Spirits wither without challenges to overcome. Earth provides that resistance, that weight, those problems and challenges, in abundance. And here's the beautiful part, Chin continued, voice rising with enthusiasm. Because Earth is so challenging, because it demands so much from us, every human achievement means something. When a Centauri engineer designs a building, they do so knowing it will never face an earthquake or a hurricane or a flood. When a human engineer designs a building, they do so knowing that everything they create will be tested, that their work will either stand or fall based on its quality, that lives depend on their skill. This creates a different relationship with work, with craft, with creation itself. We build knowing that we're building against entropy, against chaos, against a world that will absolutely test our constructions. And when our buildings stand, when our cities endure, when our works survive Earth's attempts to reclaim them, we feel a satisfaction that I'm not sure your species can access anymore. The Valkyrian energy being pulsed with colors that the translation matrix struggled to render, finally settling on conveying profound realization mixed with something like mourning. The being spoke, and the words that emerged were hesitant, as though the speaker was discovering truth in the act of articulation. You're saying that we've lost something by prioritizing safety. That in eliminating danger, we've also eliminated certain forms of meaning. That our comfortable immortality is purchased at the price of intensity of experience. Chen's response was gentle, devoid of judgment. I'm saying that you've made choices that work for you, choices that have brought your people peace and longevity and freedom from suffering. These are worthy goals and magnificent achievements. I'm simply explaining why humans make different choices. We've looked at the cost of safety, and we've decided, again and again, generation after generation, that we're not willing to pay it. Not because we're brave or foolish or masochistic, but because we've learned through painful experience that we need Earth's challenges to remain fully human. There's a concept in human philosophy called the hedonic treadmill, Chin explained, shifting into lecturer mode. It describes how we quickly adapt to improved circumstances, how what once seemed like luxury becomes normal, how the elimination of one source of suffering just makes us sensitive to smaller discomforts. Your species have run this treadmill to its logical conclusion. You've eliminated all the major sources of suffering, and now you suffer from their absence. Not physical suffering, but a kind of spiritual malnutrition. You've solved all the life or death problems, so now you're left with problems of meaning and purpose. We see this in your literature, your philosophy, your psychology. Prosperous species grappling with questions of why, searching for significance in lives that are comfortable but somehow empty. Humans solve this differently. We maintain the life or death problems. We keep the stakes high. And yes, this means we experience more fear, more loss, more grief than you do. But it also means we experience more triumph, more relief, more hard-won joy. When a Zephyrian celebrates their 200th birthday, it's pleasant but expected. When a human survives to see their grandchildren, having dodged all the ways Earth tries to kill us across decades, that's a victory. That longevity means something because it was earned, fought for, achieved against odds. This is why human celebrations tend to be more intense than yours, why our gatherings often seem excessive to other species. We're not just marking time passing. We're celebrating survival, achievement, the fact that we're still here despite everything. The ambassador moved back to the center of the floor for the final summation, and there was something ceremonial about the gesture, as though Chen was not just representing humanity, but embodying it. I'll tell you a secret about humans that your xenoanthropologists might have missed. We don't actually see ourselves as separate from Earth. Not really. When we say Earth is trying to kill us, we're being poetic, anthropomorphizing natural processes for narrative effect. But deep down, we know the truth. Earth isn't trying to do anything to us. Earth is simply being Earth, expressing its nature, following physical laws that predate our existence by billions of years. And we are Earth's children, shaped by its processes, refined by its pressures, made into what we are by every disaster we've survived. Our DNA carries the record of every extinction event our ancestors weathered, every ice age they outlasted, every predator they evaded. We are not living on Earth. We are Earth, become conscious and creative, Earth's way of knowing itself. When you ask why we choose to stay on a death world, you're asking why we choose to remain ourselves. Because leaving Earth, really leaving it, not just physically but psychologically, culturally, spiritually, would mean becoming something else. Maybe something better by your metrics, safer and longer lived and more peaceful. But not human. Not what 300,000 years of adaptation to the most dynamic, challenging, beautiful, terrible planet in this region of space has made us. And we've decided, as a species, that we'd rather be human on a death world than something else in paradise. That's our choice. Not made in ignorance of the alternatives, but in full knowledge of what we're refusing and why. Chen paused, and when speaking again, it was with quiet finality that somehow rang louder than any shout. So yes, we live on a Class 12 death world. Yes, our planet regularly tries to kill us with weather and geology and biology. Yes, we could leave for safer harbors, and some of us do, and we wish them well. But the rest of us, the billions who wake up each day on Earth, we look at our dangerous, beautiful, impossible world, and we choose it again. We choose the storms, and the earthquakes, and the predators and the diseases. We choose the constant negotiation between human ambition and natural indifference. We choose the intensity, and the meaning, and the hard-won joys that only come from living on the knife's edge between comfort and catastrophe. We choose Earth. Not because we're too stubborn to leave or too stupid to recognize the danger, but because we understand something essential. The only way to truly live is to remember you can die. Earth reminds us every single day. And for that, despite everything, we're grateful. The silence that followed was profound, the kind of quiet that descends when beings accustomed to having answers realize they've been asking the wrong questions. Ambassador Chen returned to the human delegation seat, and the council moved on to other business. But something had shifted. In the days and weeks that followed, the question would no longer be why humans choose to live on a death world. The question would become whether other species had made a mistake in choosing to leave theirs. And that, Chen knew, was a question each civilization would have to answer for itself.